Welcome back, 365 Sports. Grayson Grundhoefer in for his weekly segment. And Grayson, you sounded so forlorn when I called you because you were hoping to have a commitment announcement today, but as of right now, we don't.
Yeah, exactly. And, this has been kind of a whole day-long process because the staff started, I believe, tweeting about this. I think it was at like 8 this morning. So just kind of been waiting on some things to see if anything's going to be announced today or not. But yeah, it's just been kind of a waiting game for sure, as Baylor looks like they're going to probably add a commit in the 2025 class coming up soon.
So Grayson, I think Paul teased a quarterback. Is that what we're looking at? I mean, I know you can't reveal too much information, but that's obviously been a storyline for them, is trying to figure out what to do ever since Adam Schobel flipped to Oklahoma State. I mean, is that what we're looking as far as this goes, or is it another position and we're reading this wrong?
Well, I think that if you kind of go off of just the way that, we've kind of reported things on Sic'Em 365, Baylor did have a quarterback prospect on campus yesterday, which was Coppell 2025 quarterback Edward Griffin. He was the first quarterback to receive a 2025 offer from Baylor since Adam Schobel flipped his commitment from Baylor to Oklahoma State. So Edward got on campus on Thursday. He got his offer 2 weeks ago on May 10th. He's just been a guy that's been in constant contact with Jake Spavital. And just kind of building that relationship, right? And he got on campus yesterday, kind of got to know the staff a little bit better, got to meet Coach Aranda, and just kind of all of those things. And I think that that would make some sense since he just visited. Obviously, he was the unanimous overall District 6A MVP this past season. Threw for 3,500 yards, 48 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. So if he is indeed the prospect that they're able to land following his unofficial visit, that would be huge, to get a quarterback in at this point, especially as official visits are starting to ramp up in June. It's always nice to kind of have the face of the class, right? That's the guy that's going to go out and help recruit other prospects. And also, for Baylor, a huge focus for them is the wide receiver position in this class. And I do think that, prospects, I don't think it's the end-all be-all who the quarterback is in the class, but I definitely think that it helps when you see a guy that's really performed at a very high level, in 6A Texas football. That's a huge deal, I think.
Grayson, what other doors could this open for them?
As far as
like when you get the quarterback, do you think it's going to open some other doors, especially considering how good this guy was a year ago?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing really is just the simple fact that, you'd have him committed, and then that kind of leads into this June period where you have 3 official visits in a row. And so you have this great opportunity to have him at least on one of those official visits talking to a lot of the prospects that are uncommitted, the guys that you could possibly land. And again, I think they're really focused at the wide receiver position. They have a lot of wide receivers who will be taking official visits, a lot of guys that they are certainly in on. They made the top 5 today for a 4-star wide receiver out of Shadow Creek, Ja'Cory Watson. So he's just one of those names to definitely keep an eye on. So, yeah, I think, it matters in regards to just those relationships, seeing that there's a quarterback in place, seeing that there's going to be a high school quarterback in this class. All of that would be, a big deal if they do, in fact, land Edward Griffin.
Grayson, what kind of sentiment? I think we talked to Mac Rose the other day, and it feels like Baylor's going to, be involved at a high level as much as they possibly can. But do you get any sense of like dread or worry about, some of the stuff that's in the news this week as far as just the rules changes and athlete compensation and things like that? Do you sense from the Baylor side of things that they're ready to go and the football program's ready to go, or is there a little bit of still figuring out to do?
I mean, I think there's going to be some figuring out to do. I'm not so sure that there's dread right now or anything along those lines at this moment. But, I think that's probably one of the hardest parts about NIL is just the fact that it keeps changing and that there's all these, different factors that start to happen and these different rules that come up. And I think when you start kind of seeing those rules change, it makes you have to pivot a little bit. We saw Baylor pivot this offseason. They've changed a lot of things. Dave Aranda's really focused on the NIL part of things because we know that he made mistakes with that in the 2022 season and, of course, last year as well. So he's fixed that, but now, as more rules change, you're going to have to change, your formula as well. And so I think that's kind of what they're going to be working on. But I haven't heard anything as far as, there being this sense of dread or this sense of, oh, you can't keep up with other programs or anything along those lines. I think it's still business as usual, but I also think that they definitely keep an eye on these things because you have to nowadays. I mean, everything matters when it comes to NIL, and you got to find ways to make sure that you're able to continue to keep your program contending.
Grayson, I know that they've done a lot of work on the offensive line and the transfer portal. Do you think that 5 is set, and do you think that there's any straggling positions or stragglers out there in the portal that they might go get?
I think that right now the offensive line, it seems at least that the staff is comfortable with where the offensive line is at now. And they've added 4 offensive linemen total in the transfer portal, 2 of them post-spring ball, which were South Carolina offensive lineman Sidney Fugar and Texas A&M offensive lineman Colton Thomason. So they added those 2 in the first portal. They added Kurt Daniker and Omar Igbedian. And so I think they kind of feel like they got the right combination of talent, experience, potential, and upside. I think that to come together to where I think they feel good that they can have a quality starting 5 out there and potentially, a quality 8. Now, quality can mean a lot of different things, but from a team that was probably, in the bottom, I don't even know, probably bottom 25 as far as offensive lines go last year, at least bottom 30. If they can get that to being, closer to being a top 70 type unit or 75 or somewhere just being average in the Big 12, that would go such a long way. It probably would have won them, maybe 2 or 3 games last year had they been just that level. And so I think they feel like they're getting closer to that. I still think it's a wait and see as it is with all transfers. You kind of just got to see how they adapt and see how they develop in this new scheme. Now, as far as other positions go, they added Rod Dilworth this past week out of East Carolina. That was a huge focus for the staff, trying to get a linebacker in the room. There was thought of maybe taking a younger guy, but I think ultimately they went with a guy who does have some upside, but he also has a lot of experience and is only taking up 1 year of eligibility as well. So I think they feel good that he can come in, fill a role as kind of this hybrid will linebacker type who will also play, various positions in different packages and just give them, again, a veteran, a guy that, 21, 22 years old that's played some football in his career and should be able to come in and really stabilize that room and give them some depth there while they try to develop some of their younger guys. Because as we saw last year, the linebacker group really, really struggled.
What position outside of offensive line, or maybe what 1 or 2 position groups outside of offensive line do you have the biggest questions about? Because I feel like when we look at the it's always O-line. Where else would you look? That's obviously number 1, but what would be maybe 2 or even 3?
I think that the offensive line, of course, is going to be the biggest question mark. And I think a lot of people are probably going to have defensive line as the big question mark after the year they had last year. But I really think Baylor's done a nice job solidifying that position. I feel good about the talent that they have there. So I don't think I would put that one there. I'm actually going to go with 2 positions that I think there's question marks, and there's also returning guys that have to step up, and that's linebacker and safety. Both of those spots are, I just think, kind of a little bit still up in the air. And with safety, I'm including Starr in that as well. But, I think at linebacker, we've all been kind of waiting for Matt Jones to take that step forward. And, simply it hasn't happened consistently enough. And last year, was tough because he was always playing next to someone who was really struggling, especially once they lost Mike Smith. So he had to really take on a huge workload. I think this year he should be put in a better position to succeed, but he's going to have to take a step forward. And then next to him at will is Keaton Thomas, who was a JUCO prospect. So while I think he's going to be a really good player, I think he's great athletically. He gives them something very different. I think there's still a question mark there. I mean, he hasn't proven it at this level. So I still think that position has some question marks. And then, of course, safety. You returned Devin Bobby and Devin Lemire, but I don't think either of them had great seasons last year. So I think they definitely need to take a step to another level. But then Starr was just so bad last year. It really struggled. Eventually, the Baylor staff had to move Carl Williams to that position, and he helped it. But I still think there's room for that position to take a bigger step forward with Carl Williams and, of course, Kendrick Simpkins, who transferred in from Western Kentucky. They're also going to get Josh Lair on campus, the 4-star prospect out of Fort Bend Marshall. He'll arrive in June. So, yeah, I mean, you got guys there, but the question is how good are they and, what level is that position going to play at? Because as we've seen the last 2 years, that position has not been very good since Jalen Petrie left. And it's really left, I think, a glaring weakness and hole in the Baylor defense.
Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com, always on Fridays at 3:45. Grayson, have a great 3-day weekend, buddy.
Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate y'all.
All right. When we come back, Dan Luss